Chapter 4. Login. I scream in awe and horror as my world becomes a kaleidoscoping whirlwind of colours, as my now digital soul is flung down a rainbow stream of energy. Chaos and order crashed into one another all around me, forming and reforming incomprehensible patterns of madness and beauty. I managed to remain semi-calm in my new incorporeal state, able to draw on some of my more intense psychedelic trips to help me deal with this experience. While trying my best to enjoy having my consciousness tossed into a wormhole, I find that I have enough time to wonder at this strange and jarring login process. As I try to sit back and enjoy the wonderful colour show around me, I begin to hear a sound that permeates through the cacophony of colours. The sound is just that perfect pitch which screams of warnings and emergencies. Whatever it is, though, it's somehow coming from all around me, and also gives the feeling of being far away. I start to see a light at the end of my cosmic bridge. But as the sound gets louder and louder, the sound waves begin to distort the patterns around me. Shit, is the noise somehow disrupting the login process? I watch as the distortions begin to create a disharmony with the wormhole, sending cracks which spread through the rainbow tunnel. The sound becomes piercing. Pain screeches through all of my senses. I wish for ears that I could plug, as I silently scream. My disembodied mind thrashes as the cracks begin spreading through me. Burning pain fills me as my essence begins to tear. With a sudden crash, the energy bridge implodes and then explodes, causing the pulling sensation to stop, and sends me plunging into the void that waits behind the cracks. No visuals here, nothing except for pain and that ungodly sound. It was pulsing, growing louder and louder, filling my mind and blocking out my ability to think. The noise causes me to give in to a screaming insanity as a defense mechanism, it helpfully teaching me all the ways that even an energy wave could hurt. Then, all at once, there was a great crashing, tearing, gnashing, ripping away at the layers of distortion and revealing the sound to be a blaring and repeating alarm. A grinding of metal on metal screeched across my soul, and with another great lurch, I suddenly opened my eyes. Wherever I was now, I had a body again, and it was surrounded by some kind of green slime, the substance sliding against my open eyeballs as I looked around. I was so happy to be out of that horror dimension that it took me a moment to register how strange my new situation was. I reached my arms out in front of me, having to basically swim through the thick slime to do so. With a little exploration, I found myself to be in a circular, coffin-like space. From what little I could tell through the slime, the space was made of a smooth, metal-like material. I continued exploring, and was more than a little horrified when I traced several kinds of tubes that lead from the walls behind me and into my mouth. It's kind of funny how this worked, but I only started gagging once I was truly aware of the tube. I had to suppress the urge to rip it out right then, forcing my instincts to understand that it was the only thing keeping me from drowning in the slime. I run my hands around the rest of my body and find that I'm totally naked in here, which is probably a good thing, as I bet that this slime stuff would be harder to navigate with the friction of clothes. The space I was in was barely larger than myself, and for some reason it shook every now and again. The alarm blared around me, clearly the same noise that assaulted me during the login process. Luckily, the slime muted it a fair bit as it filled my ear cavities. Now that I took a closer look at the walls of my cage, I noticed that the material was some kind of fogged glass, making it so I could just make out a room beyond. It was blurry, dully lit and metallic, and there seemed to be a bunch of storage units or something out there. One thing was for sure, that Siren's call was definitely coming from out there, and every part of my being screamed at me to get out of this slime-filled death trap. I reach out my hands, pressing my back against the pod and push against the glass with all the strength I could muster. The force I was able to exert was pathetic. My body was not only exhausted, but the slime prevented any quick movements or real transfer of momentum. The glass held firm against my efforts, forcing me to give up my escape attempt. I take a moment to breathe, harder than it sounds with the tubes in my mouth. I guess this is a good time for introspection, right? Is this part of the evolution server? It seemed like I didn't make it to where the login cosmic horror show was taking me. I guess I never did ask what it was going to be like. The pod shakes again, jiggling the slime like jello, distracting me from my thoughts. Annoyed, I try again to explore the pod. This time, I use my nails to try and find a seam or something in the metal, hoping that I could find a manual release or something. As I explore the bottom of the pod with my fully extended foot, another violent shake throws me at the side of the pod, causing me to hit my head against the glass. Now, with an awesome headache, I find a whole new way to experience the piercing siren that had almost destroyed me before. Horror fills me as another far more immediate metallic shearing noise shatters the space around me, vibrating my bones. The noise brings along a huge, lurching rumbling, which knocks me around the pod, gaining me a few bruises. Then suddenly I was loose, my cage falling from wherever it had been hanging. Luckily, the slime helps to cushion the blows as the pod crashes into multiple things as it makes its way to the ground. When the spinning, jarring journey finally stops, I reopen my eyes and am pleasantly surprised to feel air against my eyes rather than the thick slime. The front of the pod had been smashed open in the crash, and the green ooze was steadily pouring out from the new cracks. Honestly, of all the things that had happened so far, I counted this a win for me, as Operation Escape the Goo had been going pretty poorly. I took a moment to enjoy the little victory, right up until my ears were uncovered. Then everything was horrible. Not only was the siren now clear of its slimy obstacle and therefore able to slice through my brain and its headache roommate, but I managed to catch the ending of an announcement. Landfall is currently scheduled to occur in 31 minutes. Good luck, everyone. The word landfall really stuck out to me. Why not say landing? Okay, so now I really have to find out what is happening out there. The cracks in my pod weren't large enough for me to get through, but the slime had managed to drain down to my waist. I brace myself against the back of the pod again, and this time am able to launch my feet at the glass casing, sending my kick to where the cracks were most concentrated. The first two blows don't do much, but the third one connected in just the right way, causing the cracks to spread and deepen. I take a moment to channel my inner enraged monkey instincts, and with the last kick my right leg manages to break a large section of the casing off. The jagged edges of the material slice through my naked flesh as I push through the lid. The edges have even more fun as I quickly retract my leg back into the tank. I choke on a scream, and the tube, probably mostly the tube, as the slime begins to earnestly pour out of the newly enlarged hole. Pain throbs through my leg, but luckily the slime, which fills the mangled cut, has a soothing effect on my bleeding wound. I take another moment to just breathe, because centering oneself is important, before I probe my leg. I run my hand along the deep cuts which run through my leg muscles. They are pretty deep, but as far as I can tell by the attribute of blind hope, I don't seem to have messed up anything vital. The leg still moves how I expect it to, and maybe it's just shock, but it doesn't seem to hurt too much yet. It takes a few minutes for enough of the slime to drain from the pod to allow my legs to be mostly clear, time which I take to just really sit back and enjoy the horrible physical and mental pain I'm in. Finally, my little break over, I grunt as I use my good leg to kick out the rest of the glass-like material, which now gives way pretty easily due its compromised nature. I can finally see beyond my metal cocoon, The outside world had a matte grey metal finish. The room itself was round, and I could see tons of what must be the same model of pod I had just been trapped in all around me and above me. The pods hung all over the walls. It created a beehive impression, though the view from down here was pretty bad. What really got me moving, however, was the alarm. I couldn't stand to just sit and listen to it. I had to do something to try and escape that noise. I steadied myself for a new kind of nightmare as I gripped the tubes with both hands and began to slowly pull them from my lungs and stomach. As the intruding tubes came out little by little, I could see they were coated with a purple, goopy substance which, as the substance passed over my tongue, tasted like a rusty chemical glue. At least the goop seemed to be keeping the tubes from scratching my sensitive internal bits as they came out. Every inch was more awful than the last, but eventually the tubes fell to the back of the pod, and I gasped my first unassisted breath. I had never appreciated fresh oxygen as much as I did at this moment. Then I threw up. Once most of the slime had drained, I noticed that there were many other wires and sensors that were connected to me. I imagined that they must be some kind of monitoring gear and things meant for injecting medicines as I frantically removed them. After I made sure I was clear of all connections to my egg-like prison, I really took a moment to examine my leg. The jagged rents in my skin were totally filled in by the slime, which, to my amazement, was performing a coagulative function for the wound. My leg still throbbed in pain, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it should have been. Honestly, I was just glad to see that I wasn't going to bleed out right away. Now that I was free from my pod, and free to listen to the wonderful alarm, I took a little time to try and figure out where I was. Around me were hundreds of pods that stretched up into a distant ceiling. From what I could tell, only mine had fallen. I looked at the spot on the wall where my pod had rested, and saw that a large piece of metal had stabbed through from the other side, cutting the machinery that had held me in place. The metal had pierced several other pods around mine, and I was pretty sure I could see blood mixing with the slime that poured from the cracks. I must have become used to the alarm, or maybe I had just gone a bit deaf, as when the voice cut in again I jumped, though I quickly realized that I was hearing the same message repeated again. The voice was calm, robotic, and as it spoke the world began to shake again. Warning, a catastrophic failure in the ship's systems requires an emergency landing. All colonists are being awoken as per emergency protocol 0114. Please do not try to exit your pods until after arrival to our destination. Your pods will act as protection against any potential dangers the landing poses to you. For any colonists not in pods, please follow the emergency lights to the nearest emergency shuttles. Landfall is currently scheduled to occur in 24 minutes. Good luck, everyone.